Hi everyone, I have a really fun set of projects to share with you today using Lawn Fawn's new Perfectly Wicked stamp set. We are also going to use the add-on stamp set as well to make a really fun pair of before and after cards. The stamp set features a whole bunch of cute little kitties, and they have their little cauldron and some potion books and little potions, and it's just so much fun to play with. So let's go ahead and get started with our first card. So all 4 cards are going to start with the saying, "Hope your Halloween is," and then they're going to have a different wish at the end of each card. So this one is going to be, "Hope your Halloween is spooky." And to start, I thought for this card it'd be fun to make it look like the little kitties are in some type of den or witch's lair. So I thought it would be good to have a background with some little bricks. I'm using the mini brick stencil from MFT Stamps, but I think any little brick stencil that you have would work just fine. And then I'm going to be using Distress Oxide inks in Faded Blue Jeans and then Chipped Sapphire, as well as black soot around the edges. And I wanted to make the background blue because I want it to look like it's kind of eerie and glowing, and I just really like dark blue. So this is what our first pass of our background is going to look like. I'm using Bristol Smooth cardstock here, and then I'm just going to go around the edges with some black soot Distress Oxide ink. I think if I would have done it again, I probably just would have used the black soot plain distress ink because I think it would have given a cleaner finish, but it doesn't really matter. We just want like a nice dark smoky background for our little witch's den for our little kitties to play in. So I'm also using this die from Lawn Fawn. I don't remember what it's called, but it basically splits the scene into 4 little sections here. And I originally thought I was like, we're going to make it look like they're all little different rooms in the lair. So we're going to put a little spider web in the corner. And again, this is also another Lawn Fawn die that was released several Halloweens ago. There's a couple little spiders that go along with it as well. And this is Hope Your Halloween Is. Now the Perfectly Wicked stamp has that saying in a different font. I took the font from the Costume Party stamp set. And then we're going to use Oliver's alphabet to make our little Halloween wish here. So I cut out each of the letters 3 times, and then we're going to use some Nuvo drops to make it look like there's blood dripping down our letters. So this is berry red, and I'm just gonna apply it so it looks like some little blood drips here. And I did that on all of our letters, and I let it dry overnight. So if you are going to make this card, just let your letters dry overnight, or arrange your letters without the drips onto the card and then add the drips at the last minute, and then just set it aside for a day to let the Nuvo drops dry. So that's another way, if you are pressed for time, how you can make this card. Just add the blood last. Okay, so we're just going to attach our little bloody letters here. And I have to admit, I did struggle trying to come up with a scene that would work with a kind of a gory Halloween sentiment with the Lawn Fawn stamps, but I think this one works. So let's go ahead and assemble the rest of the scene. So we're going to put our little cauldron in the corner with its bubbly neon green potion. We're going to have a little step stool with our black kitty standing on it so that he can stir the contents of the cauldron. And I just made a little slit between his paws there so I could fit the spoon in between there. And then we're going to take this little gray kitty who has some little black spots on him and put him on the other side, and we're going to make it look like he's pouring some of the potion into the cauldron here. So all of these little die cuts that you see here are all part of the Perfectly Wicked stamp set. And then we'll have a little poof that I popped up on a little piece of foam tape right above our little potion. And then we'll add a bookcase here. And the books, you can stamp them with the little sayings that are in the stamp set. It says tricks, spells, I have one book that I stamp potion, and then for the little potions, there are also little sayings that you can stamp on them, like Eye of Newt, there's bat wings, and then frog's breath as well. And then we have this little creepy little snake we're just going to put in the corner there. I guess they're not the best housekeepers in this witch's lair. And then we're just going to attach a little spider hanging in this little section. And then we have our spell book next to our little kitty. So it looks like that's what my house looks like whenever I'm cooking or whenever I'm making cards. Like just everything is just all over the place, right? So that's where I got my inspiration for the scene in this card. It's basically my house whenever I'm making anything. And I'm just going to pile up all those little potion bottles. I had so much fun arranging the scene. And I colored them in some really, really bright neon rainbow colors just to give a little color to the scene. We can add some white accents with a gel pen. And I'm just going to add like a little dot by the bubbles just to make them pop a little bit. And then I added some little eyes to the spider. And then I wanted that to look like a skull and crossbones in that one green book there. I don't know if we get that effect since it's so small, but that was the idea that I had. And that's it. So here is our first card. So hope your Halloween is spooky. You could also try Hope Your Halloween Slays. That is another idea if you like the blood theme. And now let's go ahead and move on to our second card. So for this card, I left in the Copic coloring, and we're going to use toner grays for our little witch's pot or our cauldron here. So I'm going to start with the darkest shade and just go along the edges of our pot here and along the edges of the feet. I left a little white highlight in the center of the feet there. And then I'm just going to work my way inwards with lighter toner grays as we go through. And you can use any grays that you like here. This one is made with the toner grays because the toner grays will give you the best effect for metal. Most of the other cauldrons I think I colored in with cool grays because that will give you a really, really crisp, like bluish, purplish black tone, like just a pure black. So for the other cauldrons that you'll see in this video, they're all done with cool grays, but I wanted to give an example of another set of grays that you could use for a different toned cauldron. And then we're just going to work our way into the middle. This is really, really simple coloring. You just start with the darkest colors on the outside and under the rim, and then just work your way inwards. And then we're going to be very careful coloring that little rim. I want to leave a white strip between the cauldron and the top of the rim just so that it pops out a little bit so that you can see it. And then we'll just add some darker shading with that T9 right underneath the rim, and we can move on to our little potion now. So for the potion, we're going to add a base of YG00 or YG01, and then we'll add some little dabs of YG03 as well. And then I started moving in with some oranges as well. So we're going to have a little potion that's bubbly with like yellows and oranges and greens here. And I'm just kind of dotting the color along just because it's a real small area, and I'm just trying to get as much interest as I can just by having some different like little variations in color. So I'm just dotting the color in, just dot, 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 pretty simple. And now I guess we're going to continue on the bubbles here. So I'm going to add in my darkest color for the green with the YG09. And now I think my potion looks good to me. So now we can move on to the little kitties. So we're going to give him a base of Y21. He's going to be, I think, a little orange tabby here. And then we'll give him some shadows, like with the E97 under his arm, like by his belly, on the side of his face, on the underside of his tail. And then we'll darken up the shadows a little bit with a YR27. Going over that same spot as before, under the chin as well. And then we'll just build the color out a little bit with the YR27. And then we'll just blend it all towards the middle with Y21. And one thing I've noticed, I've been watercoloring a lot, and one thing that spilled over to my Copic coloring from watercoloring is that in watercoloring, you leave like lots of spots of just like different values of the color or different shades of the color. So I remember when I started with Copics, I want everything to be completely smooth. And with watercolor, I'm starting to get used to the idea that it actually looks good if the image has some like rough spots throughout. So you'll see my coloring will look a little more rough now because of, I guess, that influence of watercolor in my life. And then we're going to give this tabby some stripes. So I just used some browns there. I think I used E57 and then E59 to darken them up a little bit. And he looks like a little tiger. I love it. And we'll just blend things in a little more with Y23. And I guess some Y24 as well. You really don't need to fuss as much as I do. But I guess I was in a fussy mood when I made this. Now we can move on to our wooden spoons. So for the wooden spoons, I'm using E23 and then I think E27 and E29. So the E20s will give you a really, really bright, saturated brown. And for Halloween colors, when I'm coloring for Halloween, I want really, really bright, saturated colors. So you're going to see lots of that in the coloring here. All right, so now we can move on to putting our card together. So I did the background the same exact way I did with the bricks, except there are no bricks there. It's those same blues with the black soot. And then I just put a little black soot over the grass there. These are all dies from Lawn Fawn. I used the wood grain cardstock from Lawn Fawn for the little tree frame here. And that's the grassy meadow die set for the grass. And then I'm just going to pop that little piece of the die out with my little punchy tool. And then I'm just putting the whole card panel onto a card base. This is an A2 size card, so 5.5 inches by 4.25. Now we're going to assemble our little pot. So the cool thing about the die is that it gives you a little bit of extra room on the bottom so that you can attach the potion into the cauldron. And the reason they're in two pieces is because there are different things you can put in the pot. So you can put some little candies in there, you can put a bunch of snakes, and we're going to do both of those in the next card. So I'll show you how that works. So I had another spider web just sitting around, so I thought, why not just add it to this card as well in the corner. I just love how the spider webs just fit so nicely in the edges. And then we're going to stick our cauldron like in between the little blades of grass here. And I'm just going to futz with it until I get it just in the right position. And then we have our little kitty standing next to the cauldron. And we're going to give him the little wooden spoon. I just tucked it behind his hand. And then here's our sentiment, hope your Halloween is. And I embossed the sentiment on some black cardstock with some white embossing powder. And then this one is going to be, I hope your Halloween is creepy. And again, I struggled a little bit trying to make these Lawn Fawn images creepy. So I had to dig into my supplies, and I'll show you in a second how I kind of solved that when we get to the little details we're going to add to the kitty and to the cauldron. So I'm just going to glue on the letters here. And one trick that I do is that I just leave all the letters placed and then just pick them up individually and then add them back on. So this way you get the proper placement. And then we're going to add another little spider just kind of hanging out from the top of the scene here. And I'll just cut off that little bit of excess. And then we'll give him eyes as well with our white gel pen. And then we'll add some little details into our cauldron. So I'm just dotting the color in. And then I thought, let's see, maybe we can make it look like he's kind of has a little bit of moonshine on him. So I just added some white reflections on like the right side of his body and then on the top of his tail there, like the parts that would be getting hit by the moon. And to make him look creepy, I took out my eerie eyes from Doodlebug and I just attached a big pair of turquoise eyes on him. And then we're going to put some eyes in our little cauldron as well. So now I think we have made this scene look creepy enough to justify the little Halloween wish at the bottom. Then I got this wonderful container of Halloween sequins and little clay bits from Pretty Pink Posh. So I said, ooh, this would be perfect. Let's add some little accents here because the creepy isn't really standing out against the background. So by just adding some little yellow dots and orange and purple stars, we're going to make it really pop out. And then we can add another little orange and purple star to the spiderweb, and then maybe one next to the tree. Have some clay bats as well. And then that is going to finish off this card design. So very cute. I love the little kitty with the big crazy eyes. And now we can move on to our final set of cards. So we are going to make some before and after cards. And this die, this interactive die, was released by Lawn Fawn a couple of years ago. I have a couple of videos showing different ways to use this die. If you're interested, just check the playlist on my YouTube channel for this. And to start, I just trace in the little square part where our scene is going to go, just so I know exactly how much room that I have. And then I also just make a note as to whether I'm working on the before or after part of the scene. So the large die is going to be the before and the smaller die is going to be the after. So one way that I remember that is before is bigger or before is more. And then that way, whenever I pull out this die, even though it's been months since I've used it, I'll remember, okay, that's the before scene is the one that has the bigger die, and then the after scene is the one with the smaller die. We're going to stamp our scene right on to our little before strip here. And for the before strip, we're going to have a scene with a little cauldron that's just kind of bubbling away with its contents. It's not fully cooked yet. And then our after scene is going to feature a whole bunch of candy. So by the magic of whatever spell the little kitty who is in this scene is conjuring, we are going to turn this little pot of bubbles into a pot of candy in our after scene. And the sentiment is going to say, hope your Halloween is sweet. So okay, so for this one, I did leave in the coloring to show you how to do the cool gray. And this coloring technique is also a little different. We're going to make it look like the cauldron is lit up from behind. So that's why I'm leaving a little strip of white on either side of the edges of the cauldron. And that's going to, the effect that we're going to get from doing that is when the whole scene is finished, it's going to look like there's some light coming from behind the cauldron. So we're going to do the coloring the same exact way that we did for the previous card. We're just leaving that little strip of white on either side of the cauldron and a little bit on the underbelly just to help with that backlit effect. And otherwise, really, this is the same exact coloring method where you just start with your darkest on the edges of the kettle and then just work your way towards the center with your lighter colors. And then for this little potion, we're going to start with a base of YG00 again, and then some Y04. So I want it to be real yellowy looking. And then we'll add some pops of green. I'm just dotting in the color like under the bubbles by the mouth of the cauldron. And then we'll take a mid-tone, the YG03, and just kind of fill in some color along the edges. Get some more YG01 to brighten it up a bit. YG17 to help with the contrast. That's the darkest shade, or one of the darkest shades we're using. And then I even got out my YG67 to add even more darker tones here. And then around the rim, I just used a thin line of C3 and then some C7 just on the edges, making sure to leave lots of white showing along the rim so that it looks dimensional and it stands out from the rest of the kettle. And then around the edges of the scene, we're going to just color it in with some BV000 and then some BV 02. And I think all of my BV markers are running out of ink, so I have to refill them. So I was struggling a little bit. But we are going to use the darker BV, so the BV02 around the edges, and then the closest to the kettle we'll use the lightest, the BV00. And it looks like I had my marker got contaminated with some type of black or something, but it's not going to matter at the end. And now we're going to work on our after scene. So I'm just lining them up together so I can make sure that they appear in the exact same spot, and that the floor starts at the exact same spot on the kettle, like about halfway up as it does in the before scene. And then we're just going to fill this in with some E57 along the bottom. This is going to be the floor. And even though we only need to color in that little square, I make sure I give myself lots of room around the edges, just to make sure that the whole scene, so that there's no white showing on the scene at the that shows through. And then we're going to color in our cauldron using that same method. We want that backlit method, so we're going to leave a strip of white between the edge of the stamped image and then where our coloring starts. And then we're just going to work our way inward with our colors, and they'll go progressively lighter as we get towards the center. So we'll go from C9 to C7 to C5, and then to C3, and then to C1. And with Copic markers, what I found is you don't need to go like from lightest to dark. You don't need to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Just go 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, or 2, 4, 6, 8. So that's how I found I get the best results. And then it takes half the amount of time. So you just go every other marker, if that makes sense. And then I thought we'd deepen it up even a little more. So I'm going to use some C10 along the edges, which is even darker than the color that we had started with. And I'm liking that effect that we're getting. It's getting nice and dark. It looks like there's a little bit of texture as well. And then we'll just keep working our way inwards with some lighter shades. And then for the candies, we're going to have the candies in really, really bright saturated pink and blue-green and yellow, and then a little bit of yellow-green as well. But before we get there, I'm just going to go ahead and color in my background. And again, I'm making sure to give myself lots of room around where the edges of the die will leave off, just to make sure that when the scene shows through, there's no white space. And by kind of scribbling on my color this way, it can make it look like a smoky effect. But the real reason I'm doing that is because my marker's running out, and I'm just trying to press out whatever ink I can, which is not a good thing to do with your Copics. You should treat them more gently than I do. And then around the poof, I put a little blue highlight and then a little yellow for the stars. And then we'll just darken it up with some C7 along the edges, and then we'll leave it alone. And then we can move on to our candies. So I'm just going to pick out the candies that I want to be pink. So we'll use RV04 for the base coat. And then I'm just marking the other little candies that I want to be blue-green. So I use BG02 and then BG07 for the contrast color, and then RV06 for the contrast color for the pink ones. And now I'm going to take some yellow, so some Y04, and we'll color in some candies with a yellow, and then Y15 for like the contrast shade. And again, for this, you don't need these exact colors. You just need a light and then a dark of whatever shade you decide to use. And then we're going to add the little shadow underneath the cauldron. So I just have some E59 here, just making a tiny little shadow. And then I'm just going to darken up the shadow on the original as well. And And so that's what they look like. So our little before and after. Now we can go ahead and put the die cuts on top. So for our after, I'm going to line them up side by side just to make sure that the little picture showing through is in the same exact position for both. So our cauldrons look like they're lined up really well. I'm going to add some washi tape just to hold it while I run it through my die cutting machine. And then here we go. So now let's move to putting our before and after parts together. So I'm just going to fold along the score lines and then take my bone folder and run it across the top. And then there are these two little tabs on either side. We're going to push it in. It's very small. It's 1/8 of an inch. And then I'm going to run my bone folder over it. You also need 1/8 of an inch score tape to make this card. And I would definitely get the 1/8 of an inch score tape, not cutting down like if you have 0.25, because it'll just be too messy. So the way I feel, if you want really, really good results, have the proper tool. And the proper tool here is the 1/8 of an inch score tape that you can get on Amazon for just a couple bucks. And then we're going to put it on the inside and outside of the little edges. And I'm just going to cut off the overhang there. And then I use my little punchy tool here just to pick up the backing from the tape, and then we'll fold inwards on both, run our bone folder over it. And then we will add in our after scene so it just fits right into that slot. And now we're going to flip it over, and we're going to make sure that the after scene is lined up with the bottom of the before scene. So just make sure both tabs are lined up at the bottom, and then just take your thumb and press through each of these 4 little flaps so that they pop through on the right hand side. And then that's what's going to allow the mechanism to work. So once we have that done, we'll just test it real quick. It works. And then make sure everything is in the right place. Make sure it's not touching the edges of that score tape. And then I'm just going to peel up the backing on the score tape, and make sure when you close this little packet that your before scene is at the bottom, that they match, the bottoms are lined up. And then we'll take our bone folder, and there we have it. And then another thing that I do just to make the tab work better, because this paper is pretty thin, is I will put a little piece of reinforcing cardstock behind it. So just take a thick piece of cardstock, only attach it though at the very top right here. Don't put tape anywhere else except for there, and that will help the mechanism just be a little sturdier. I have to note, one of the tricks to making the before and afters work is using the right cardstock. So I use Copic Express It blending card for this, which is a thin paper, or you can use Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock. If you use 120-pound cardstock, the typical cardstock that we use for like card bases, it will not work as well. You need a thin paper. So I would either use 80-pound cardstock or the Copic Express It blending card. And then because that little tab there is so delicate, you do need to put that little reinforcing piece of cardstock behind it to help the mechanism work. So that's if you've been having trouble with the Magic Picture Changer, I think that advice will be a game changer for you. So definitely check that out. So now moving back to our card, we're just going to attach the little pull tab to the top here. And I'm just going to line it up. And then I want my letters to be black, so I also die cut it onto some black cardstock, and then I'm just going to place it right over top and then just kind of pop them in. Had that little white spot in the middle of the piece, so I just took my RV34, which matches perfectly with the pattern paper. The pattern paper that I'm using for this card is the new fall pattern paper that was released by Lawn Fawn. I'm not sure what the name of it was, but it's part of the new release, and I just took 2 different pattern papers to make this card. We're going to pop up our little before and after mechanism on the front of the card base. I used double foam tape here, and I made sure that the pull tab sticks out on top of the card so it's easier to pull. The sentiment is "Hope your Halloween is," and that font is what's included with Perfectly Wicked stamp set. And then these letters, of course, come from Oliver's alphabet. And just going to attach all of those. And again, my method here is I lay the lettering out where I want it, and then one by one I'll just pick them up and glue them on to make sure that I get the perfect placement. For this little kitty, we're just going to cut a little slit between his paws here so that we can stick the spoon in, similar to what we had done in the first card. And I'm just going to work the spoon in, and then once I had it together, I just added a little drop of glue on his paw just to hold it there. And then I'm going to pop him up on some foam tape as well. So I'm just going to take a tiny little square of foam tape in a second, but this, I'm just showing you how I glued on the spoon to his paw. And that'll make sure that it stays well. And then we're going to add the little stool right against the little before and after packet. And then our kitty is on a little square of foam tape there. And just be careful that none of the little items that you're adding actually touch the center picture window, because then that could affect the mechanism. So when I tape these things on, I'm only adding a very little bit of tape or glue to the edge of the little items, just to make sure that they don't get in the way of the magic picture changer mechanism. And then again, inspired by what my own house looks like whenever I'm working on a project, we have all the little potions and candies all over the place. And we have this cute little scene where we have our little kitties and they're making up a magical potion, and poof, it goes from a potion to the little magical candies, just like that. And I think that's so sweet. So I think this is a great card to give to like a little girl. And then I'm going to show you a version that you could give to a little boy as well. So I also made this version that says, "Hope your Halloween is slimy." And use it with that dripping blood technique. I just did that with some neon green Nouveau drops or green apple Nouveau drops. And then using the before and after little images from the add-on to Perfectly Wicked, you can make it look like there's some little snakes in the cauldron instead of candy. So for little girl, the little girl gets the little candies as the after surprise, and then the little boy will get the little cauldron of snakes and the little wish of a slimy Halloween. So I hope that you enjoyed these cards, everyone. I hope that you give some of them a try. They're so much fun to make, and I think they'll definitely bring a big, wide smile to anyone that you give them to. Have a great day, and I will see you again soon in another video.